Joining us now, Ed Yeranian, our man in the Middle East. He's live in Cairo. Here's the thing about Ed. He's a veteran. I love saying that, a veteran CBS News radio reporter. He's a veteran of the John Fredericks Radio Show, been here for 7 years and 8 months, according to our statistician, Den Black, Frugal Den. He is a key component of the Voice of America and just all-around good guy and analyst. That's Ed Yeranian. He's with us now live in Cairo. Ed, good to have you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the compliment.
Let's get to Afghanistan, Ed. Yeranian live in Cairo. The president have a big meeting in Morristown with his advisors. Among them, neocon warmonger John Bolton. Why he's still there is beyond me. So he's in there. I guess he goes in with a saber to rattle whatever they do. But look, Pompeo yesterday said, this was interesting in his interview with Martha McCallum on Fox News, who I think is just sidebar. I think McCallum is really one of the best interviewers now in America. I mean, she's just straight up. So Pompeo says, look, the president gave us two objectives with Afghanistan. We need enough of our presence there so there's not a repeat of 9/11. Secondly, we have to dramatically cut back the money we're spending and dramatically reduce the number of troops there. You have to balance that and get as many people out as you can without jeopardizing the first goal. Does that make sense?
It makes sense logically, but a lot of what happens is illogical, and you've got a lot of forces, some that don't meet the eye, pulling in different directions. Among them, countries that either do not wish well for the U.S. and others that may not have any problems with the U.S. but don't like President Trump. So their intelligence agencies, groups they work with, are gunning to make this a failure. So just to put out that warning, because I don't think a lot of forces want President Trump to succeed with this pullout.
Well, they when you say they don't want him to succeed, these are the warmongers and neocons that don't want the U.S. pulling out of anything. All they want to do is add troops all over the world, keep adding them, because every time we have troops somewhere, Eddie Yeranian, the number of money made in Washington, you have to live there to get this. I mean, the defense contractors, the lobbyists, the people that profit from troops staged around the world and from conflict is into the hundreds of billions of dollars. And especially with the military getting budget increase after budget increase, there's plenty of money to go around. So if you're one of the suppliers in Afghanistan supplying water, guns, tanks, whatever, clothes, masks, whatever you do there, if you're one of the suppliers, you don't want the gravy train to end. Simple. And so they exert a tremendous amount of pressure on various people in Washington to keep us in these constant conflicts. But, the president trying to get out, and he'd like to obviously get the majority of our troops out by November 2020. What do you think will happen?
I think we're going to see more bombings like the one we saw over the weekend of a wedding that killed about 65 people. Wounded scores, and we saw that in Iraq. I think there are forces that would like to see us present in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a special case, though. I think Afghanistan, being that it's a major NATO operation, this is one of the justifications for NATO. There are a lot of different networks that are working together that may be trying to do ill to President Trump. They don't like him. They don't like his policies. And if they can keep him stuck, mired down, bogged in Afghanistan, I think they would be happy to see that happen.
I agree with that. I think that's spot on. Ed, let's get to the Hong Kong situation. The president yesterday saying, look, if there is bloodshed by the Chinese military, it's going to be very difficult for us to go forward and make any kind of a deal. These are, the other day they had 1.7 million Hong Kongers, young people mainly, hit the streets in a protest. And that's a lot of people, 1.7 million. That was peaceful, but the ChiComs have staged military operations in a soccer field just over the border from Hong Kong. What do you see there, Ed?
Well, I think they're worried that the situation in Hong Kong is going to spill over to their side of the border. Well, I mean, it's all their territory, really. But they're worried that it spills over into the rest of China, and that they will be facing a Tiananmen Square situation once again. So I think that's their real worry. Were they going to actually cross into Hong Kong and put down this rebellion? I think, the protest, I think that they would be fearful of the negative publicity from it. I can see them very active on social media in trying to convince people in the West that the young people in Hong Kong are not democracy activists, that there are other motivations pulling them out into the streets, and that it's not the kind of movement that Western governments or Western people should be supporting. So clearly they're very active in trying to put out their side of the case. Someone actually mentioned on one of those Twitter accounts, pro-China, mainland China Twitter accounts, that China, I mean, the young people were burning flags at the airports, Chinese flags. And of course, in the West, people wouldn't tolerate this. And of course, if you're American, you know that it's not illegal to burn the flag. So that's one of their talking points, which doesn't really make a lot of sense.
How does it play out, Ed?
I fear that they're going to go in there and they're going to put this down. They did in Tiananmen Square. You probably remember that as well as I do, that young man trying to stare down a tank. You probably remember 1968, Alexander Dubček,
yes.
The invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Russian forces. Ultimately, they went in. In 1989, they didn't. I think maybe Gorbachev probably had more of a sort of an inkling to let democracy play out than Deng Xiaoping in China, who went in and crushed the revolt in Tiananmen Square. So I guess it depends a lot on the leader who is leading the country at the time. And I don't think that President Xi of China is a Democrat.
John Fredericks Radio Network, your Godzilla of the Truth in America. We're live with Eddie Yeranian, live from Cairo, Egypt. Eddie, our man in the Middle East, longtime veteran, CBS News, John Fredericks Radio Network. Ed, you're the second person I've had on that really studies this. Rick Fisher the other day, Dr. Fisher, longtime scholar, South Asia, said that he didn't think it would go to the end of August before the Chinese moved troops in and there was massive bloodshed. He said because that's how they operate. The other thing he said is that he doesn't believe that the Chinese government and President Xi can afford to let these protests go without a response, because what they're really concerned about is the young people in China and Beijing that right now are not getting jobs. And he said that wouldn't be 1.7 million, that would be 10.7 million. And they wouldn't be able to, it could collapse the government. So Fisher was saying they really have no choice. Do you hold that same view?
Having no choice is one thing, and I mean having no choice, being compelled to do something to protect your system if you want to protect it. Yes, I think in a way they're caught between a rock and a hard place, because that will spill over to Beijing if the Hong Kong protests continue and they are perceived to be successful. So, yes, I would concur with that assessment.
That seems to be a consensus now that might happen. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, the Chinese want desperately to make a trade deal with the president. He said publicly Sunday afternoon, getting back from New Jersey, he said if they move militarily, he said there's no way that I'm going to be able to make a deal with them. And I believe the president when he says that. A lot of people, you might take his tweets with a grain of salt, but I know him a long time. When he says something that emphatically, it's highly unlikely that he goes back on it. Let's get to Israel and these two Muslim congresspeople. They did a press conference yesterday. I was stunned by this. I have to say, I'm 61 years old. I've been covering this stuff for a very long time in both print and broadcast. The Democrats have been staunch supporters of Israel since whenever I can remember. Growing up in the New York, New Jersey area, every Jew that I knew voted Democratic. I didn't know a single Jew in my life growing up there that voted for any Republican ever. So they were the most loyal constituency that the Democratic Party. Meantime, you got two Democrats get up yesterday, blasting Israel, blasting the Netanyahu government, calling for the suspension of U.S. aid to Israel, which, as you know, is in the tens of billions of dollars annually. Suspending that aid until Israel gives Palestine their own state. And Ed, politically in the United States, not one peep out of Democratic leadership. Like I expected that night for Schumer or Pelosi or somebody to just basically censor these people and say they're not representative of our views. Instead, they're defending them, saying, well, Israel should have let them in. I was stunned by this only because of my age. What do you make of this?
Well, I think there's a shift in Democratic policies, a shift in many ways. I think there's also a schism or a sort of a civil war brewing between the various sides of the Israeli equation. As you can see, you've got those that support President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and those who are more liberal that are trying to bring him down. So I think there's a bit of a civil war among the Jewish community itself, which has allowed this anti-Israel sentiment to flourish in the Democratic Party, because many of the Jews that don't support Netanyahu are supporting Tlaib and Omar, the two congresswomen who are behind this effort to visit Israel and to embarrass the Israeli government.
Well, the whole thing was a setup. I mean, all they did was wanted to embarrass the government. And when Representative Tlaib said that she wanted to visit her grandmother in Palestine, Israel immediately said yes. And then she said, well, I'm not going to go anyway because you're an oppressive and racist regime. So that was a setup and a ploy. Everybody saw through that. But I'm just shocked. I'm shocked that there's no retribution by any Democrat. I mean, look, the Republican in Iowa, Steve King, says something stupid, and it was stupid what he said, and he gets rebuked, and no Republican backed him, and now he's getting a primary challenge, and the Republican leadership is backing the primary challenger. I mean, could you imagine if somebody said on the Democratic side, I tell you what, I'm going to run in a primary against Omar Elan based on what she said, and the Democrats all backing the primary opponent? That would never happen, right? You're right. There's a shift in the greater Democratic Party of America, and it took me by surprise. I mean, I kind of get the squad and all the dumb things they say, but I thought the press conference yesterday, going without any feedback from the elites that run the Democratic Party, I think that was very telling. We'll see how it goes. All right, I've only got a couple minutes. Kashmir, India, Modi, the president of the United States, talking with Modi over the weekend. Pakistan's not happy. Both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. Kashmir, basically if you live in Kashmir now, all of your rights have been suspended. You're majority Muslim in a majority Hindu country, and the president's in a box, right? He needs the alliance with India. He needs Pakistan to back him in Afghanistan. So we're not doing anything, and we just stand there. what happens?
I think it's just going to keep festering as it's been doing since 1947. I think Kashmir, the situation in Kashmir is continuing. People are still going on with their lives, even though the internet is down, even though there have been arrests. People have been protesting. They've been throwing stones, pellets, whatever, at the military that's controlling the situation there. So I think it's just going to keep going like this. And I suspect that both Imran Khan, the Pakistani prime minister, and Modi, the Indian prime minister, are wise enough not to get into a conflict.
Well, you have to admit that this was a masterstroke by Prime Minister Modi of India. This is something India's wanted to do, Eddie, for a very long time. They were never in a position to do it. Modi did it knowing that the president was in a box with Pakistan because he needs their backing for Afghanistan. And he's also in the middle of trade negotiations with India. So the president really put in a box where he can't act. I thought this was, forget whether or not you agree with the policy. Politically, I thought that this was a master move by Modi. And it really showed me that this guy, this prime minister of India, is very, very politically astute. He's going to have to be somebody that you're going to have to deal with. Agree or not?
Yes, he's very clever. He's obviously got the Indian government. He's done well running the Indian government, and he's got himself very popular among Indians. So certainly he's doing something right in front of his own public opinion. Almost
as good as Erdogan's manipulation of the European media and the U.S. media over the Khashoggi murder. We're now getting political leaders around the world that know how to work the media, they know how to work social media, and they know how to take advantage of political opportunity. And Erdogan showed that in Turkey, and I think Modi showed that in India. This guy's going to be very tough. This was a masterstroke. I mean, he did this at a time when he knew that President Trump could not act because he was boxed in. Brilliant move. Not good for the Kashmir people. That's not my analysis, right? Bad for anytime you lose freedom and autonomy, it's bad. I'm just talking politically. It was a masterstroke. This guy is really good. Ed, I got to go. Ed Yeranian.
Thank you, John.
My man in the Middle East.